The year I was the poorest. I pretended to be my sister to take care of her blind fiancé for 500,000 yuan. On the day he regained his sight, I left without saying goodbye. When we met again, it was at a business interview. I was an unknown intern reporter. He had returned to his rightful place, the young master who now held full power over the Su family. During the interview, the host asked, "We've heard that during your illness, it was your fiancée, Miss Chan, who stayed by your side through it all. Are the two of you planning to marry soon?" His lips curved slightly, and he raised his hand to reveal a ring. "Yes, we're about to get engaged." But his gaze, through the lenses of his glasses, drifted, intentionally or not, toward me in the corner. Chapter 1. Before the interview began, the room buzzed with conversation. Today's guest is none other than the young master of the Su family, the one who truly holds the reins. I heard that 5 years ago. He went blind and was even cast out of the family. If it hadn't been for his fiancée taking care of him, he might not have survived. "Shoo, keep your voice down." I sat quietly to the side, forcing a smile, but my nails dug deep into my palms. Suddenly, my senior colleague, Tom, turned to me. "Pilar, go get me a glass of water, would you?" As I walked toward the water dispenser by the door, the large doors suddenly swung open, a familiar figure stepped in, and my mind went completely blank. 3 years had changed Duncan Su beyond recognition. The once thin and delicate young man had grown tall and broad-shouldered, his facial features sharper, more defined. Those once misty eyes were now cold and clear. "Excuse me," he spoke lightly, his gaze sweeping over me through the lenses, calm, detached, as though I were a stranger. Not a flicker of recognition. He walked past me, flanked by bodyguards, toward the stage. As he passed, a faint, cool woody scent lingered in the air. I stood frozen, stunned for several seconds before it hit me. The 2 years I had been by his side were the darkest of his life. He had been cast out of the Su family, blinded in a car accident, and of course, he never knew what I looked like. Maybe that was for the best. When I returned with the glass of water, the interview was already underway. Duncan sat calmly on stage, his fingers interlaced under his chin, composed and confident as he answered questions about business and finance. Suddenly, the side door opened. Sandra walked in, smiling as she spoke to Duncan. "Sorry, Duncan, the film crew kept me longer than expected." She lifted the shimmering hem of her champagne-colored gown and took a seat beside him. The room went silent for a heartbeat, then burst into a buzz of excitement and speculation. Tom glanced sideways at me, holding his cup. His eyes lit up as if he discovered something. "Pilar, you actually look a bit like Sandra." I pressed my lips together, forcing a small smile. "She's a movie star. You flatter me too much." Of course we looked alike, because she and I were sisters. Chapter 2. During your illness, it was thanks to Miss Chan's unwavering devotion that you recovered, wasn't it? The two of you must be planning your wedding soon? My throat tightened suddenly as I looked up at Duncan Su on the stage. He curved his lips slightly, lifted his hand, and revealed the ring finger on his left hand. There, he wore a plain silver ring, the very one I'd once bought for him with the money from a part-time job, just to cheer him up, on the dignified air of the Su family. That cheap ring looked painfully out of place, yet he seemed not to notice at all. His fingertips brushed over it lightly. "Yes," he said calmly, "we're getting engaged soon." As he spoke, his gaze swept across the audience, and, for a brief moment, fell on me in the corner, only for a few seconds. Before he looked away, the microphone was then handed to Sandra Chan. "Miss Chan, we've heard you're currently working with director Liu on his new film. He rarely casts new actors. Was Mr. Su's influence part of the reason?" She smiled, graceful and poised. "Of course. I've always been confident in my own professionalism," she continued, "but I won't deny that Duncan has done a lot for me, and I fully deserve his affection." Her composed honesty drew murmurs of admiration from the crowd. Then someone asked, "Could you share the story of how you and Mr. Su supported each other through those difficult times?" Sandra's smile froze. An eerie stillness spread through the room, as though time itself slowed down. After a long pause, Duncan let out a low laugh, taking the microphone back. "There's not much to tell. he said. Those memories belong only to the two of us. My eyes stung suddenly. I gripped my pen tighter, bowing my head in panic. The moment I closed my eyes, the memories flooded back. In his youth, Duncan's defiant nature had made him many enemies. After he lost everything, some of them came looking for trouble. I tried to protect him and was shoved down the stairs, my body covered in blood. Those men panicked and fled. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to stand, pretending nothing had happened. Come on, I told him softly. Let's go home. But Duncan suddenly grabbed my hand. You're hurt. We're going to the hospital. I'm not. I can smell blood. His voice rose sharply, trembling from those cloudy, sightless eyes. Tears fell, like stars dulled by dust. The boy's not yet broad shoulders pulled me tightly into his arms, and the name he called out was my sister's. Sandra, he whispered, when I recover, I'll give you the grandest wedding in the world. Chapter 3. After the interview, the sky had turned gloomy. Outside the venue, rain fell in a fine silver curtain. Tom patted his pockets, then barked another order at me. Pilar. I left the memory card inside. Go grab it for me. I hurried back across the slick pavement. When the elevator number blinked to 1, the doors slid open, and I came face to face with the last two people I wanted to see. Sandra stood slightly sideways, chatting with Duncan about trivial matters from the film set. He looked indifferent but listened patiently, his posture relaxed, intimate. The moment she saw me, Sandra's expression darkened. Sorry, I muttered quickly, stepping aside and turning toward the stairwell. But Duncan's voice stopped me cold. Wait, I froze. Aren't you taking the elevator? Go on. I turned around slowly, lowering my voice deliberately. Thank you, Mr. Sue. He told me to use the elevator, but didn't move aside. He just stood there, staring at me. So you were one of the reporters today? Funny, I don't remember hearing any of your questions. I lowered my gaze. Mr. Sue, I just graduated and returned to the country. I'm still an intern. I don't have the qualification to ask questions. I see. His response was faint, unreadable. Beside him, Sandra shot me a vicious glare and said sharply, Let's go, Duncan. We still have to meet Director Liu tonight. Only then did Duncan withdraw his gaze. All right, let's go. Chapter 4. I stood alone in the rising elevator, staring blankly ahead. After my parents divorced, my father remarried into the wealthy Chan family, taking Sandra with him, from as far back as I could remember. I'd never seen her again, until 5 years ago, when she suddenly sought me out. I'll pay you 500,000. Take my place and look after someone for me. At that time, my mother had just passed away, and I was drowning in debt. I had no choice but to agree. Only when we met did I realize the person she wanted me to care for was Duncan Sue, the young master of the Sue family, her fiancé, whose accident had happened not long after their engagement. A blind man, and a fallen heir. Who would want to take care of him? She said with open disgust. If it weren't for the public image, I would have called off the engagement long ago. Back then, Sandra had just begun her acting career. She'd landed a promising role and was on the rise. Afraid of being labeled heartless, she dumped the responsibility on me instead. Duncan had lived 18 smooth years before life shattered overnight. His temper had become unbearable. When I first went to take care of him, he constantly lashed out, sharp-tongued and sarcastic. I took it silently. I was being paid to do a job. Until one day, I visited my mother's grave and came home a little late. He started raging again. Sandra, stop pretending in front of me. I know you despise me. You're only here because you're afraid of what people will say. He didn't finish, because I suddenly leaned in and kissed him. It was my first kiss. Awkward, clumsy, driven by anger more than tenderness, more a bite than a kiss. Duncan went still. Even the tips of his ears turned red. You. I bit his lip again, deliberately, almost cruelly. Then I pulled back just enough to catch my breath. My hands braced against his shoulders. Do you feel it now? I whispered, my voice trembling. Do you still think I despise you? Chapter 5. I took the memory card downstairs to find Tom. He looked pleased. Pilar, you're really quite diligent. Perfect timing. There's a dinner tonight. I'll take you along to meet some people. In journalism, Connections are everything. I quickly thanked him, but when we arrived, I froze in the parking lot. A sleek black Rolls-Royce was parked nearby, one I knew all too well. Mr. Su, is he here tonight too? I asked stiffly. Tom turned and winked. Of course. The dinner I'm taking you to is his dinner. Pilar, don't underestimate your buddy Tom's network. It was far too late for regret. I could only brace myself and follow him inside. Fortunately, the private dining room was large. Small reporters like us weren't seated anywhere near Duncan and his circle. Tom introduced me to several senior figures in the industry. This is the newcomer at our company, sharp and hardworking. Name's Pilar. Pilar, come say hi to everyone. As the newcomer, I had no choice but to toast each table in turn. By the end, my head was spinning. I barely managed to mumble an apology before rushing off to the restroom. Hand over my mouth. I threw up until my stomach felt empty, rinsed my mouth, and splashed cold water on my face before stepping out again. The hallway was dimly lit, the air thick with the faint scent of cedar and wine. By the window, a familiar silhouette stood in the shadows. My heart skipped hard against my ribs. I considered pretending not to see him, just walking away. But before I could, a low, steady voice called out behind me, Pilar. I froze mid-step. I swallowed hard, hearing slow, deliberate footsteps approaching. My eyelids fluttered shut on instinct. The footsteps stopped right in front of me. That familiar, cool scent enveloping me inch by inch. I opened my eyes and met his deep, ocean-dark gaze. Mr. Su, I managed, my throat tightening. How did you know my name? He didn't answer right away, only studied me in silence for a few seconds before straightening. Your senior's been dragging you around making toasts, he said flatly. Everyone in the room knows your name by now. Thinking of Tom's booming voice, my cheeks flushed. I'm sorry, my senior's been really kind to us newcomers, maybe a little too enthusiastic. If he disturbed your evening, I apologize on his behalf. I spoke carefully, choosing my words to make sure Tom wouldn't get in trouble. But Duncan didn't respond. Under the warm, golden light, his eyes narrowed slightly, a faint, unreadable smile curving his lips. So, in reporter Pilar's eyes, he said softly, I'm that petty of a man? I lowered my head. That's not what I meant. A moment later, a gold-embossed business card appeared in front of me. You're still an intern, aren't you? He paused, his tone unreadable. There's a job opportunity, he said. Would you like to try it? Chapter 6. When I went back, my head was still spinning. The moment I stepped through the door, Tom grabbed my arm. You okay, Pilar? Pressing a hand to my aching stomach, I whispered, sorry, Tom. I had stomach surgery before. I can't really drink much. He frowned, about to say something, then his gaze dropped to my hand, to the gold-embossed business card I was holding. His eyes widened in disbelief. Is that Mr. Su's personal card? I nodded. The memory of what had just happened still made my pulse quicken. That card, the legendary, impossible to get. Direct contact to Duncan Su himself. No reward comes without reason. I raised my eyes warily, lowering my voice. Why would Mr. Su give such a rare opportunity to a nobody like me? He curved his lips slightly. Maybe, he just finds you pleasing to the eye. That was a very Duncan-like reason. Back when I took care of him, we'd grown closer over time. And Duncan, for all his pride, had a way of showing it, especially in private moments. I remembered those nights all too clearly. I'd grit my teeth, swallowing down every sound as my fingers tangled in his hair. You can't even see, stop moving around. In the dim light, the boy tilted his head up slightly. Soft strands of hair brushed across his unfocused eyes. He licked his lips, his fingers pressing gently against my neck, firm enough to make me shiver. His voice was low, rough, almost coaxing. Everything else still works, he whispered. So make some noise. Let me hear you. I blinked, snapping back to the present, and quickly made up some excuse to brush off Tom's curiosity. The next day, when I returned to the office, my supervisor called me in. Smiling, he said, Pilar, we're partnering with that trending relationship reality show. I want you to join the next recording as a guest observer. But once I started reviewing the materials, my heart sank. The next guests to be interviewed were Sandra and Duncan. After that last business interview, news of their engagement had exploded across social media. It was all over the trending list, an intentional prelude to their upcoming appearance. The comment sections were flooded with adoration. They went through the hardest years together, now they've reunited at the top. That's real love. I heard the Chan family business was failing, but with Sue Group's support, they're thriving again. Power couple of the century. So jealous. I skimmed through line after line, then shut the screen. Beside me, the show's host, young duo, was checking the script and chatting casually. If we can dig up some details about Mr. Sue and Miss Chan's time together during those years, the ratings will skyrocket, she said with a grin. My fingers tightened around my pen. Got it, I murmured softly. Every moment of those 2 years, every word, every touch, every secret. No one knew them better than I did. And yet, I could never tell a soul. Chapter 7. With the Sue family's influence and backing, Sandra had become one of the country's top-tier actresses. The show had barely begun when the livestream room was already packed, over 1 million viewers watching in real time. Under the bright stage lights, I heard the host, young duo, begin. We've heard that Mr. Sue and Sandra are already discussing marriage. Would you share with us how your relationship has grown over time? Sandra turned her head toward Duncan, smiling softly. I never believed any of the rumors that tried to slander him. She said gently, to me, Duncan has always been the man I love most. Her gaze was tender, her expression full of devotion, sweet enough to melt sugar. Duncan, however, lowered his eyes and gave a faint, almost mocking smile. Liar. Have you forgotten how much you despised me when I first went blind? Sandra froze for half a second. Her eyes flickered toward me, sharp and venomous for just an instant. But with the cameras rolling, she could only force a graceful smile. I don't really remember much about that, she said softly. Maybe our love grew deeper, and all I recall now are the sweet memories. I glanced at the live chat feed behind the stage. Messages like "so sweet" and "couple goals" flooded the screen, a tidal wave of pink hearts and praise. Setting down my script, I tightened my grip on the microphone and asked evenly, it seems the two of you have slightly different perspectives. Perhaps there's more to the story? Could you tell us how you managed to overcome those differences? I half expected him to dodge the question, but after a brief pause, Duncan spoke. When I first lost my sight, I was angry at the world, at myself, and honestly, I didn't like her either. She worked long hours, then came home just to take care of me. One day, she was cooking fish soup and realized she'd run out of salt. She went downstairs to buy some and forgot to turn off the stove. When she came back, the kitchen was on fire. Something lodged in my throat, and suddenly, I was back there, that burning hot night. The stench of smoke and the roar of flames still clinging to the air. I had dragged Duncan out of his room, clutching his collar, and slapped him hard across the face. Do you have a death wish? I shouted. My whole body had been trembling, so was my voice. But this time, he didn't fight back like he always did. He stayed silent for a long time before speaking, his voice hoarse. Wouldn't it be better if I did die? Wouldn't that set you free? And in that moment, I realized, the once untouchable young master of the Sue family had crumbled into nothing more than a wounded, cornered boy. So I pushed him back into the room, still gasping for breath. The walls were scorched black. I unbuttoned his shirt one by one, my voice low and trembling. I didn't get to eat dinner, I murmured. So you'll make it up to me. He seemed to understand what I meant, his breath hitching. You'd better think carefully. The rest of his words were swallowed by my kiss. Duncan, I whispered against his lips. I've never thought of you as a burden. That night, it felt like the whole world had gone mad, and there was only the two of us left. Now, as he recalled that same story, the woman sitting beside him wasn't me. It was Sandra, and the whole world believed that memory belonged to them. A suffocating ache spread through my chest. The scent of him, the one that used to belong to me alone, now surrounded me again, quietly, inexorably, every breath, every heartbeat. And yet, none of it was mine anymore. He paused. Then, in the middle of the audience's applause, smiled faintly and said, I'll never forget that night. The moonlight was so bright, it could have illuminated everything. I couldn't see her face, but she talked to me all night long. My hand clenched tightly around my pen. I lowered my head, hurriedly, as my eyes began to sting. Chapter 9. Because I'd improvised my questions midway through, bringing up details no one had ever heard before. The interview turned into a massive success. By the end of the broadcast, live viewership had surpassed 10 million. For the first time, the public had caught a glimpse of the untold, hidden past of the Su family's heir. Everyone in the studio was buzzing with excitement. Backstage, young duo patted my shoulder with admiration. "You're a real reporter, Pilar." Those last-minute questions were razor-sharp, no way he could have dodged them. But before I could reply, her expression stiffened, because Duncan and Sandra were walking toward us. Duncan's gaze swept over me, calm, cold. "Those questions today, were they your idea?" I nodded. Sandra's tone dripped with poison, wrapped in sugar. "Reporter Pilar, you're quite talented at finding people's sore spots. But let me give you a little reminder, learn to keep to your professional ethics. Don't covet things beyond your reach." I said nothing, just turned to look at Duncan again. His expression was unreadable, voice cool and measured. "Reporter Pilar is very capable. From now on, she'll handle the media coordination with our company." Sandra whipped her head toward him, eyes wide, her mask cracking for a split second. Inside those eyes were fear and hatred, raw and unfiltered. Later, she cornered me in an empty hallway, voice sharp and trembling. "You really don't know when to stop, do you, Pilar? You took my money back then, so why are you back now?" I met her glare calmly. "I graduated. I came back to work. A simple, ordinary truth. Work? Do you think I'm an idiot?" She suddenly snapped, swinging her handbag at me. "Get lost. Tell him you're giving up the assignment, or I'll make sure you can't stay here another day." The Hermes bag hit the ground, the chain snapping open, scattering lipsticks, receipts, and a phone across the marble floor. I ignored her and walked away. Sandra, as always, made good on her threats. Soon, I began running into obstacles everywhere. Projects that had been mine were suddenly reassigned to others. Until one evening, just before clocking out, my supervisor called me into his office. "There's an important annual development conference next month," he said pleasantly. "You'll be hosting it." I blinked, startled. "Mr. Su personally requested you," he added. "After work." Across the street from our office, a black Rolls-Royce was parked under the streetlight. When the window rolled down, Duncan's expressionless face appeared inside. "Reporter Pilar," he said evenly, "since you're so curious about my past, why not ask me directly?" I lowered my gaze. "I didn't mean to pry into your private life, Mr. Su. It was just for work." "Even if it's for work," he replied, "I gave you my private card. You could have contacted me directly." I pressed my lips together. That wouldn't be necessary, because suddenly, I was acutely aware of the years that had passed. 3 years. He was no longer that reckless, sharp-tongued boy. He was now Mr. Su, powerful and composed. The Chan family had declined, without Duncan's silent permission and protection. Sandra would never have dared to target me so openly. Maybe, to him, that chapter of our lives was nothing but a stain, a humiliation best left buried. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "Wait." The car door opened, and he stepped out, tall, steady, blocking my path completely. "Miss Pilar," he said, his tone softer this time. "Can we talk?" I clutched my bag against my chest, my throat dry. "What does Mr. Su want to talk about?" Duncan's lips curved faintly. There was a hint of helplessness in his eyes, something unguarded. "Fleeting. Work," he said. "Can we talk about work?" Chapter 10. The following couple of weeks passed quietly. Duncan came to see me twice more. We went over the key decisions that would be announced at the upcoming press conference. At the end, as if suddenly remembering something, he handed me a document. "There's a major tourism project that hasn't been announced yet. It's a direct collaboration with the provincial government. You can announce it at the press conference. Consider it your exclusive scoop." I was silent for a moment. Then I took the document and said, Thank you. When Tom found out, he kept persuading me. Seems like President Sue appreciates you quite a bit. Why don't you subtly bring up how Sandra's been suppressing you? I kept editing my hosting script, smiled faintly, and replied, no need. You think he'd go against his own fiancé for a reporter he barely knows? When the day of the press conference arrived, the venue was packed. The seat that should have been occupied by Duncan Sue in the center was empty. Under the blinding flashes of countless spotlights, I was announcing several major upcoming collaborations for the Sue Corporation. Suddenly, a stranger among the journalists stood up and shouted, "Where did you steal this classified information from?" My face turned cold. My collaboration with the Sue Corporation was conducted entirely through legitimate channels. Legitimate? Someone like you, sleeping your way to the top through unspoken rules, has the nerve to say that? He raised his voice. I have proof. Then someone stepped onto the stage. It was Sandra. She fixed her gaze on me and sighed softly. Pilar, it's understandable that a small-time reporter like you would be drawn to Duncan. I wanted to spare you some dignity, but clearly you won't stop until you hit the wall. Behind me, the large screen suddenly switched from the presentation slides to a few explicit photos. And the person in those photos was me. You sent him those photos, didn't you? Showing up at his hotel door in the middle of the night wearing a slip dress. And here's the security footage of you entering a hotel room with your boss. As she spoke, the screen changed again. The dim lights of a hotel entrance, my boss and I walking in together. You're a repeat offender. The crowd gasped in shock. Then the main doors of the hall suddenly swung open. Duncan strode in, dressed sharply, his eyes cutting through the crowd like a blade. His gaze swept past me, without stopping. My heart sank instantly. The spotlight burned down on me, as if I were being executed in front of the entire world. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Disgraceful. She's a stain on journalists everywhere. So low. Absolutely disgusting. Fire her. Ban her from the industry. I didn't look at anyone. I only stared at Duncan. He turned to Sandra and said coolly, "What did you just say?" Sandra's eyes reddened instantly, tears trembling on her lashes. Duncan Sue. She tricked you. She pretended to be an interviewer just to get close to you and steal confidential information that could harm Sue Corporation. Even this hosting opportunity, she only got it through unspoken deals. Duncan was silent for a moment, then looked at me. Do you have anything to say? Chapter 11. What did I have to say? In Sandra's gaze, I could feel both her hatred and her satisfaction. And suddenly, I found it all utterly absurd. She was only 2 years older than me. We shared the same father and mother. After our mother passed away, she and I were supposed to be each other's only remaining family in this world, the closest people alive. I lifted the corners of my lips in a mocking smile. Gripping the microphone, I began to speak. I do have something to say. President Sue, your fiancé is slandering me with malicious lies. If you choose to turn a blind eye to her fabrications simply because you love her, then I'll make sure to record every word of this in the press release for today's event. The public isn't blind. If a leader can't even distinguish right from wrong, how could anyone trust the projects he develops? Whether it was the rebellious young master from the past, or the cold and decisive leader he had become, anyone else would have been furious at such an open provocation. But he wasn't. He simply stepped onto the stage, one measured stride after another under the blinding lights, standing across from me at the same height. His voice was soft as he called my name, Pilar. A sudden ache welled up inside my chest. I didn't want to hear him defend Sandra. Turning my head away, I said clearly, word by word, all accusations made against me are baseless fabrications. President Sue and I have had nothing beyond a professional working relationship. No private contact whatsoever. Before I could finish, Duncan interrupted me. No contact? His voice cut through mine like a blade. You gave me a ring, and you're telling me you don't plan to take responsibility for that? Chapter 12. I froze, whipping my head toward him. He raised his left hand, revealing a plain silver ring on his ring finger. It was cheap, the material ordinary, the craftsmanship nothing special. Yet because of the care of its owner, it shimmered brilliantly under the lights. That ring pulled me back into a memory from 4 years ago. That day had been Duncan's 19th birthday. For the first 18 years of his life, every birthday had been extravagant, loud, and filled with guests. But that year, the only company he had was me. To cheer him up, I'd taken 2 temporary jobs between editing my thesis. With the little over 200 yuan I earned, I bought a pair of cheap matching rings. When I came back, I grabbed his hand and slipped one onto his finger. Though Duncan Su couldn't see, he could feel it. His ears turned red as he pretended to stay calm. "What's this?" he asked. I teased him. A couple was fighting by the roadside and threw stuff away. I waited around, picked up a ring. "Don't look down on it, young Master Su. Don't call me that." His Adam's apple moved slightly as he carefully cradled the ring against his chest. "Even if it was picked up, I still like it," he murmured, "because it came from you." And he meant it. In all the days that followed, even during our most intimate, passionate moments, he would still wear that ring. And in his low, hoarse voice he'd whisper, "Do you feel it? This is your love for me. Relax a little. You'll hurt yourself." Only in those moments would he reveal a flash of the wild, unrestrained young master he once was, bold and untamed. When I came back to myself from the memory, Duncan was already closing in on me step by step. "Say something, Pilar." "There's nothing to say," I answered softly, clutching the fabric of my dress. "President Su, you must be mistaken. That ring, isn't it the token of love your fiancé, Miss Chan, gave you?" He gave a short, derisive laugh. "I never said where the ring came from. How come you know so clearly?" As he spoke, he stopped right in front of me, so close there was no room to retreat. Whispers began to ripple through the audience. What does he mean? Is he saying the one who stayed with him through his downfall was that young reporter? Then who's Sandra in all this? You know, they do kind of look alike. Sandra stared at me, hatred flickering in her eyes, but she had no choice but to soften her tone and coax Duncan. "Duncan, don't let her fool you. She's a liar. She's done this before." I closed my eyes briefly, pressing down the turmoil rising in my chest. When I opened them again, I could finally meet his gaze with perfect calm. "Yes," I said evenly. "I gave it to you. Back then, I was desperate for money. I pretended to be Sandra and deceived you for 2 years. Later, I took the money and left. I've already forgotten what happened. Since from the very start you thought it was Sandra, and you're now engaged to her, what's the point in correcting it now?" I couldn't keep speaking. My throat tightened, but I forced the tremor down with a few deep breaths. I set the microphone down and turned to leave. Just as I moved, a hand caught my wrist. Skin against skin, his palm was still the same, burning hot. His voice came low and rough. "Of course it matters. You once said that as long as I wore the ring you gave me, no matter where I was, you'd recognize me at a glance. Does that promise still count?" My eyelashes trembled violently. I lowered my gaze, pushing every emotion deep into my throat. Gently, I pried his fingers away, one by one, and slipped free. When I looked up again, my face was cold and unreadable. I forgot. Chapter 13. I lied. Actually, during those years studying abroad, I was always thinking about Duncan. In the winter when he was about to return to the Su household at 19, that was the peak of our passionate romance. Northern winters are painfully dry. When we kissed, static would spark and prick like tiny shocks. I had thought about confessing my identity to him more than once. There were many moments when feelings ran so deep he would press his lips to my ear and, in a hoarse voice, call me, "Sandra, Sandra, don't leave me." It was like a bucket of cold water dumped in my face. At that moment I suddenly realized, from the start, I'd come to him with an unmentionable purpose, to take someone else's place. Duncan once told me, when I was little my cousin tricked me into a closet and locked the door. I almost died in there. I hate being lied to more than anything in this life. If he knew the truth, would he hate me to the bone? On the eve of Duncan's 20th birthday, the Su family patriarch fell seriously ill and unexpectedly discovered the truth of the past. It turned out Duncan had been deliberately framed from the beginning, even the car accident had been arranged. He sent for Sandra to take Duncan back. Sandra came to see me. She was already a famous actress by then, chin tilted, walking with that swagger, looking down at me. Now the Su family is going to formally accept him again. You aren't still dreaming of flying up to the treetops, are you? Wake up. Whether it's the Su family or Duncan, the one they acknowledge is me, Sandra. From the start, You were just a cheap knockoff. She pulled a check from her bag and flung it at me. I'll give you 500,000 yuan, stop dreaming. Or I'll tell everyone everything that happened back then. I suddenly raised my head and stared at her. Sandra, our mothers are the same mother. My mother is the eldest miss of the Chan family. Who does she think she is? She snorted. Just a prostitute. That evening the sunset was blood red. I lost my temper, grabbed Sandra by the collar, and punched her twice hard. Amid her screams, someone burst through the door, twisted my arm, and pinned me to the ground. The glamorous movie star stood above me, looking down like she owned the world. Am I wrong? Take the money and go quietly abroad. Don't show your face here again, or I'll make sure everyone knows all her ugly secrets, carve them on her tombstone if I have to. She left. I stared at the check fluttering on the floor. My mind drifted back 2 years. Because my mother was sick, the family had taken on a lot of debt. After she died, I couldn't even afford a decent grave. At just that time, Sandra reached out to me. Need money? She asked. Before I finished explaining, she sneered. She only raised me for a few days. She's dead. Why should I give her money? I thought maybe she felt resentful and wanted to hear the truth. So I tried to explain. Back then she wanted custody of you. You cried to go with Dad. Of course I wanted to go with Dad. Do you think I'm as stupid as you? Sandra's face hardened and she cut me off. What? Do you want to keep me here to live the same poor life as you, so poor you couldn't even afford a grave when you died? I looked at Sandra in front of me. All my words stuck in my throat. I couldn't get a single one out. On that almost identical, carefully made-up face, 6 or 7 parts similar to mine, there was nothing but impatience and disgust. Her silk dress, the diamond necklace at her throat, the crocodile skin bag on her arm, each of those things alone would cost more than I could imagine. She lifted the coffee on the table, took a slow sip, and finally explained her intention. Still, for the sake of us being sisters, she said, I'm not completely heartless. If you want money, I won't refuse. 500,000 yuan, you pretend to be me and take care of someone for a while. Chapter 14. The press conference had turned into a complete farce. The looks people were giving Sandra grew stranger by the second. Some even turned their microphones and cameras toward her. Miss Chan, is what President Su just said true? Was it really not you who stayed by his side during his downfall? But the reporter, Pilar? Are all your accusations from earlier fabrications? She couldn't refute them. All she could do was look to Duncan for help. Duncan, you know me best. I've been with you for years. How could I ever do something like that? Duncan lowered his eyes toward her from the stage and smiled faintly. Don't be afraid. You said you had solid evidence, didn't you? The lawyer is already here. Everything that happened today will be properly recorded for the case. His voice was calm and gentle, almost soothing, but Sandra suddenly began trembling, as if she'd just seen a monster. The press conference could no longer continue. I gathered my hosting notes and stepped down from the stage. Without a word, Duncan followed right behind me. It's raining outside, he said softly. Let me drive you. The rain poured down like buckets spilling from the sky. I hesitated for 3 seconds, then decided not to deny myself a bit of comfort. When I slid into Duncan's Rolls-Royce, I glanced sideways and caught the faint, secret joy glimmering in his eyes. But as soon as I pulled out my phone, I realized the entire incident from the press conference had been live-streamed. It was already trending, under multiple hashtags. The internet was in chaos. So Sandra stole the reporter's credit? That's so shameless. Stole what? She's the type who sleeps her way to the top, who knows who's really lying here. They checked. Those nude photos were photoshopped. Even if they were real, she was paid to do the job. The job's done. She took the money. What's she got to complain about? Am I the only one who thinks Duncan's the real victim here? 2 women, both liars, both playing him. Something lodged in my throat. I hurriedly locked my phone and looked out the window. Raindrops streamed down the glass like tiny rivers, blurring the racing lights outside into messy streaks of color. Compared to 3 years ago, the city hadn't changed at all, but between Duncan and me, everything had. Back then, the Su family had hired the most renowned specialists to operate on him. After 2 surgeries, Duncan had finally regained his sight. Sandra, terrified that I'd exposed the truth, hired bodyguards to keep watch on me 24 hours a day. They shadowed me everywhere, making sure I never got near him. But the day he regained his vision, they brought me to the hospital themselves. Through the door of the ward, I couldn't see Duncan, but I could hear his voice, laced with insecurity. "Sandra." "Duncan. I'm here," she replied softly. "I was so worried about you." Her deliberately altered tone was almost identical to mine. Duncan didn't notice the difference. He only sounded slightly displeased. "You promised that when I could see again, you'd be the first person I'd lay eyes on. You broke your word." I didn't listen any further. The sharp pain in my chest swelled until it nearly consumed me whole. From the beginning, the person in Duncan's world, the one who had stayed with him through those 2 years, had been Sandra. Not me, not Pilar. Sandra's bodyguards dragged me into a side lounge. Moments later, she walked in on her high heels. Her makeup was flawless as always, except for her lipstick, smudged into a messy blur. "Duncan kissed me," she said languidly as she reapplied it. "He really loves me. Can't live without me." Then she glanced at me through the mirror, voice smooth and slow. "You took good care of him these past 2 years. But to him, everything you did was done by me. Someone like you, born so low, could never, ever have anything to do with him." Chapter 15. "Where are you going? Home?" Duncan Sue's voice suddenly broke through my thoughts. I lowered my head slightly. "Could you please drop me off at the office, President Sue? I still have some work to finish." But he didn't start the car. Instead, one hand resting on the steering wheel, he leaned toward me. There was a faint sadness in his expression. "Pilar, must you really call me that, so distant?" His familiar scent lingered in the air between us, mixed with the crisp freshness of rain. It wound around me, tugging me back into 1,000 old memories. And in that instant, I suddenly didn't want to hold back anymore. I pushed him away and looked at him coldly. "Then what should I call you? Young master? Or Duncan? Do you want me to call your name again, like 3 years ago, when I was bleeding for you, and you shouted Sandra instead?" His voice caught, the words dying in his throat. "Those 2 years are over," I said, my tone sharp. "The one engaged to you has always been Sandra. Your life's back on track. Why come back to haunt mine?" "Because this isn't my track," he said quietly. Duncan's eyes reddened. I had never even met Sandra before. From the very beginning, the only person I recognized, the only one I saw, was you. Pain welled up inside me like waves, thick and suffocating. I closed my eyes, forcing my trembling voice to steady. "You're still lying to me, Duncan. The day you regained your sight, I was right outside the hospital room. I heard you mistaking her for me without hesitation. You held her, kissed her. I didn't." His sudden interruption stunned me. The moment I opened my eyes, he said, calm but unyielding, "I knew she wasn't you." I froze. Then Duncan's voice, steady and low, filled the silence between us. "The Sue family situation is complicated. That day in the hospital room, there were people there who wanted me dead. So the instant I realized she wasn't you, I made my decision. Sandra was the perfect decoy, the perfect target." He gave a faint, almost dangerous smile, the kind that carried both sharpness and pain. "Didn't she love pretending to be someone else? Then let her play that role to the end." Images flashed through my mind. News headlines I'd once seen while studying abroad. Reports said Sandra had almost died on set after a real explosion went off. Another said she and Duncan were nearly killed when a billboard collapsed during one of their trips. "I never meant to deny you," he continued softly. "A lot happened these past 3 years. After my grandfather's death, the vultures in the Sue family came one by one to kill me. Now they're either in prison or in their graves, including my own mother." His lips curved faintly, though there was no warmth left in the expression. "I was never afraid of dying. When my cousin went mad and stabbed me to steal the family shares, I didn't even feel the pain." In that moment, his voice grew almost a whisper. "I just missed you." Chapter 16. The parking lot was silent all around. Under the dim glow of the headlights, Duncan slipped off his suit jacket and began unbuttoning his white shirt, one button at a time, revealing the scar that ran across his chest, dangerously close to his heart. "The Sue family is a mess," he said quietly. "It was never something easy to win. But it doesn't matter. After tonight, Sandra and the last of the people backing her will fall. 2. The entire Sue family, including me, can be yours. He leaned closer, inch by inch, until the distance between us was barely anything. The eyes that were once clouded and unfocused now gleamed like galaxies full of stars. I swallowed hard and whispered, "But you and Sandra, I never kissed her, not once." He emphasized each word. "I'm clean, you can check for yourself." Sister. That single word snapped the last thread of reason in my mind. As I lunged forward, tearing open his collar, memories of countless feverish nights came rushing back. His darkest years had also been the most uncertain, chaotic years of my life. All those wild, tangled emotions. In the end, they became the desperate, consuming passion between us. In the reclined seat of the car, I grabbed the tie still hanging around Duncan's bare neck. Just like before, after every fight, every heartbreak, I pulled it tighter, inch by inch, the faint pressure of breathlessness. Duncan closed his eyes, a low groan slipping from his throat. "I missed you." He wrapped his arms around me, burying his face against my neck, his burning palms sliding slowly along my waist. "They're fools," he murmured. "A docile, obedient doll like her could never be you. No one can ever play you." The voice that was once sharp and cold was now thick with desire. By the time the wind and rain had stopped, it was already late at night. Duncan drove to a villa. His tie was still loosely hanging around his neck, red marks faint on his skin. I took out my phone and saw the top of the trending list. A breaking news alert flashing in red. Hashtag Sandra taken into custody. "Last month," Duncan said, his tone unreadable. "My half-brother contacted her. He threatened to expose her secrets unless she stole bidding documents and other classified files from me." I was silent for a long moment, then said softly, "I know, you know." Duncan turned his head sharply toward me. "Was it you, Pilar? Was this your doing?" I nodded slowly, digging my nails into my palm to force myself to stay composed. "I came back for this, to destroy the Chan family, to destroy Sandra, to reopen the case from 20 years ago, when the Chan family fabricated lies that ruined my mother. For that truth, I'll pay any price. My work in the media is the most important reason. 20 years ago, because he fancied my father, the young eldest Miss Chan set a trap to frame my mother, claiming she worked as a prostitute. And tiny, barely grown Sandra, desperate for the life of an elite young lady, actually helped outsiders, pushing her own mother straight into the abyss. My mother was detained for 15 days and lost her job. When she came home, every neighbor pointed and whispered, defending my father's honor. After my parents divorced, my mother, carrying that shameful label, dragged me back to the countryside in disgrace. She sank into depression and, not yet 50, fell ill and died. On the day she died, the television in the hospital was broadcasting news about the Chan family. They said the Chans were a loving couple, their children exemplary, model aristocrats among the wealthy. How ridiculous. When my mother died, she weighed less than 35 kilos. Her hands full of bruised needle marks. She could have lived a long life. The Chan family's business isn't clean. They ruined so many people. How can they be called a model family? I covered my eyes and forced the flood of tears back. "Duncan, I used you. I knew you wouldn't forgive anyone who betrayed you. So I made her do something to deliberately break your taboo. You can hate me for that and be hurt by it, but I must send her to hell with my own hands." I swallowed every emotion, forcing myself to look at him as calmly as possible. "But, sister, your hands are shaking." Duncan took the hand I had hidden behind my back and, carefully, brought it to his lips and kissed it. "Don't be afraid. You used me. I'm happier about it than anything. It proves you have me in your heart. I will, of course, stand by your side. I told you, the whole Sue family, me included, is yours." Chapter 17. The matter of Sandra being taken in for investigation raged across trending topics for 3 days. The Chan family tried to suppress the public outcry and begged Duncan for help. He sat behind his desk, listened to their pleas, and smiled. "You tell a touching story, but I'm sorry, this decision has to be made by my fiancé." My father arrived with his high society wife and their expressions changed the moment they saw me. I offered them a faint smile. "You two should start preparing yourselves, because soon, You'll be like her. Duncan held a press conference to clarify his relationship with Sandra. When asked, he wore a half smile. Fiancé? I never claimed it was her. The person I've always been referring to is the one who accompanied and cared for me back then. A reporter pressed, but didn't she take money from Sandra to care for you? Duncan's smile remained, but his eyes grew colder by the inch. To that reporter I would say, watch your words. There are so many rich people in the world, why would she only accept money to take care of me unless she loved me? The reporter went silent. I sat beside him in silence as well. After the conference, I released several voice recordings from when Sandra first approached me years ago. A blind man, an abandoned scion, who'd want to take care of him. She only raised me for a few days. She's dead. Why should I give her money? Do you want to keep me here to live the same shabby life as you, too poor to even afford a grave when we die? The public erupted. Wait. I always thought her public image was that of an elegant, magnanimous actress? So she and Pilar are biological sisters, and she actually asked Pilar to impersonate her? Everything she wears adds up to millions, and she wouldn't even pay for her own mother's grave. Disgusting. Riding that roaring tide of public opinion, I went live. In front of millions, I revealed the truth from 20 years ago. Cecilia Chan, the eldest miss of the Chan family, set her sights on my father. When she couldn't get him and they divorced, they teamed up to set a trap, framing my mother with shameful rumors so she'd have to live the rest of her life in disgrace. Standing behind me was a nervous, crew-cut man. During my graduate studies and internships, I hunted for leads and worked hard to find him through a senior in the field. He had a habit of petty theft and had been in and out of custody. That whole thing was something Cecilia ordered me to do. That Pilar woman is innocent. She was coaxed by her daughter to the Chan family's drinking party and got drunk. I helped her into a room and tucked a wad of money under her pillow. Cecilia had people call the police in advance. Before my mother, drugged on purpose, could sober up, the anti-vice squad burst in and opened the door. Even now, it's easy to frame a woman with sleaze rumors and pin the label of a loose woman on her. Especially back in those days. I studied media and went into journalism not just for this one case. I will spend the rest of my life clearing the names of girls who have been wrongly accused and slandered. Chapter 18. The live stream added the final spark that burned the Chan family to ashes. From the very beginning, their wealth had been built on dirty dealings. And now, with a nationwide crackdown underway, they were bound to be caught in the storm. It was never me supporting them, Duncan said. It was my dear half-brother. We only had a few business collaborations, nothing that can't be severed easily. Don't worry. None of this will touch me. Only then did I finally feel a bit of relief. I handed all the evidence I'd collected over the years to the police. Thanks to the clean break Duncan had made after taking over the Su family, he remained completely uninvolved. The day the Chan family finally collapsed, I brought a bouquet of flowers and took Duncan to visit my mother's grave. In the photo on her tombstone, her smile was as gentle as ever, yet tinged with sorrow. She'd been a kind, soft-hearted woman, and she had truly loved my father. Maybe that's why, even after all those years, she could never move on. Before she died, I told him quietly. She held my hand and told me not to blame Sandra. She said, "Your sister isn't really a Chan by blood. Life must be hard for her there." She never knew, all these years, Sandra had built her place in the Chan family by shaming and belittling her. She'd flattered Cecilia, clawed her way up one careful step at a time. From the very day she entered that house, she began to rot. I brushed my fingers across the photo. "Mom, no one will ever think you were at fault again. I have a good career now, and a boyfriend." From beside me, Duncan murmured, "Fiancé." I sighed. "Fine, fiancé." I instinctively turned the silver ring on my left hand, the matching pair to Duncan's. After going abroad, I had buried it deep in a box, convinced I'd never have the chance to wear it again. I straightened the flowers before the grave and bowed deeply. When I turned back, Duncan was watching me intently. "Pilar, go wait in the car," he said softly. "I want to speak to your mother alone for a moment." The autumn night wind was cool. I waited in the car for a long time before he finally returned. There was dew clinging to his black coat, outlining the sharp lines of his face. I tilted my head toward him. "What did you say to my mom?" He started the engine. It was a while before he spoke. "I just said, thank you. for bringing you into this world. Otherwise, I would have died in that summer 5 years ago when I was at my lowest. Chapter 19. When everything finally settled, I was officially promoted, even gained a small bump in position. I began leading independent interviews. The first case was about a high school girl, bullied by a group of wealthy classmates for over a year, until she jumped from the school rooftop. Those families are powerful. No one dares to touch them. My supervisor said, hesitant, if you don't want to take it. Of course I'll take it. I interrupted. I accepted the folder. Actually, I'm already drafting a campaign plan for anti-bullying awareness. I'll send it to you this afternoon. It was rare and useful that Duncan now held wealth and influence. If I had his backing, I intended to make use of it. That investigation, and the accompanying awareness campaign, kept me busy for more than half a month. I hardly saw Duncan at all. He sent 20 messages. I replied with one sticker while skimming social media, a piece of bread between my teeth. That evening, he texted that he'd prepared a surprise, told me to come home early. No excuses. When I opened the door, starlight shimmered outside the window, and the room was filled with steam and heat. Duncan was propped up against the headboard, breathing heavily, eyes glued to me, his gaze sticky, intense, burning through me. Pilar, he said hoarsely, you've been neglecting me for too long. I stared at him long enough for the usually cold, decisive President Sue to blush at the tips of his ears. Then I slipped the camera strap from my shoulder and tossed it at him. Put it on yourself. My voice was rough from a day out reporting. I'm taking a shower first. Duncan obeyed without complaint. When I came out, towel drying my wet hair, everything had already been arranged. Only one small lamp glowed by the bed. Moonlight poured in like melted ice. But even that couldn't cool the dense, humid air. Pilar, he murmured, kiss me. You're too tense. Let me out, a little. Each word, each breath, tangled with the heat in his gaze. Pure temptation. By the time the storm subsided, dawnlight was already brushing the sky. I suddenly remembered something. Next month I'm going on a business trip, I said quietly. A very important interview. About a little girl in the mountains who's been assaulted by her entire village for years. She walked all night through the hills before reaching an internet cafe to contact me. That place is isolated. The local power network's deep-rooted. It'll be difficult to investigate, so I'll have to stay longer. Duncan's hand tightened against the bones of my back. It'll be dangerous. Then so be it, I replied lightly. I sat up, reached for a cigarette, and lit it with practiced ease. He watched me in silence, eyes following the curl of smoke. I'll try to protect myself as best I can, I assured him. But this kind of story, this is exactly what journalism is for. It's our duty. He was quiet for a long while. Then, suddenly, he said, I'm coming with you. But don't you have that major contract next week? It can wait. Why? There's really no need, MMPH. The rest of my words were swallowed by his kiss. Deep, fervent, unstoppable. His lips trailed down to my throat. His breath warm, uneven. In a low, rough whisper, he said, because I'm your most loyal guardian, you chase your ideals, and I'll be the one to shield your path.